I'm Melissa Thompson, 29, and I haven't spoken to my family in 3 years. The last time I saw them was at my father's house where he slid a folder across the dining table containing my sister Emma's $78,000 debt. "You need to pay this," he said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. My mother nodded in agreement while Emma stared at the floor. That night, I emptied my bank account, packed one suitcase, and vanished from their lives. They created the debt trap. I refused to be their solution. Before I dive deeper into what might be the most shocking family betrayal story you'll hear this week, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like button if you've ever had to set tough boundaries with family. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics gone wrong and the journey to finding peace. Now, let me explain how I went from the reliable daughter to a ghost overnight. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. 2-story suburban home, well-maintained lawn, family dinners every night. But inside those walls, the dynamics were anything but equal. From the time I was old enough to understand responsibility, I was cast as the reliable daughter. I got straight A's, never missed curfew, and started working part-time jobs at 16 to save for college. My sister Emma, for years younger than me, operated under an entirely different set of rules. Where I faced consequences for the smallest infractions, Emma received endless second chances and emotional support. When I earned a partial scholarship to Ohio State, my parents celebrated by taking Emma shopping for a new wardrobe. "Your sister needs cheering up," my mother explained, "she's feeling overshadowed by your accomplishments." This pattern continued through our young adult years. I majored in accounting, graduated with honors, and secured a stable position at a respected firm in Columbus. Meanwhile, Emma bounced between expensive private colleges, changing her major 4 times before dropping out entirely. Each time, my parents covered the tuition and fees without hesitation. "Your sister is finding herself," my father, Richard, would say dismissively whenever I questioned the double standard. My mother Diana would add, "Not everyone can be as naturally disciplined as you, Melissa." By 25, I had paid off my student loans, built an emergency fund, and was contributing to my 401k. Emma, at 21, had maxed out 3 credit cards that my parents had helped her obtain. When the first bailout happened, I witnessed my father writing a $12,000 check to clear Emma's debt. "Just this once," he promised my mother. But it wasn't just once. The jewelry business came next. Emma decided she had found her passion and needed startup capital. My parents offered their retirement savings, but Emma insisted that wasn't enough. "I need a real business loan," she declared over Sunday dinner. "The equipment alone costs thousands." "Melissa could co-sign," my mother suggested, looking at me expectantly. That was the first time I firmly said no to my family. The silence that followed was deafening. "I thought family supported each other," my father said eventually, disappointment heavy in his voice. "I do support Emma," I replied. "But not by putting my financial future at risk." That night, Emma didn't speak to me. My mother called the next day to tell me how heartbroken my sister was by my lack of faith in her. The guilt trips continued for weeks, but I held my ground. Emma eventually secured a loan through other means, though I later discovered my parents had put up their house as collateral, a fact they deliberately hid from me. The jewelry business, Emmeline Designs, operated for 8 months before failing spectacularly. Emma had spent lavishly on a premium retail location, high-end packaging, and excessive inventory without establishing a customer base. When it folded, she simply moved back home, while my parents absorbed the fallout. Despite all this, I maintained a relationship with my family, though increasingly on my terms. I limited Sunday dinners to twice a month instead of weekly. I stopped answering financial questions. I built a life separate from the constant drama that surrounded Emma. Then came the call on a Tuesday evening in March. "Melissa, we need you to come over right away," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "It's a family emergency." I asked what happened, if everyone was okay. "Just come. Now." The urgency in his voice triggered my ingrained sense of family duty. I canceled my evening plans and drove the 20 minutes to my childhood home, anxiety building with every mile. Had someone died? Was someone ill? The possibilities raced through my mind. Little did I know that the emergency would be the catalyst that finally freed me from a lifetime of financial and emotional manipulation. I arrived at my parents' house just after 7, the familiar driveway now causing an inexplicable sense of dread. The porch light was on, but the house seemed unnaturally quiet. No television noise, no kitchen sounds, nothing to suggest the normal rhythm of the household. When I let myself in, I called out but received no answer. Following the dim light from the dining room, I found them all seated around the table like a tribunal awaiting a defendant. My father Richard, now 61 with streaks of gray throughout his once dark hair, sat at the head of the table. My mother Diana, 58, perfect posture as always, sat to his right. Emma was hunched in a chair to his left, her normally animated face unusually somber. "Sit down, Melissa," my father said, pointing to the empty chair across from him. No hugs. No greetings. Just the command. I complied, the familiar sensation of being the obedient daughter sliding into place automatically. "We have a situation," he began, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "A family situation that requires your assistance." He slid a thick manila folder toward me. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, collection notices, and credit reports, all with Emma's name. "Your sister is in financial trouble," he said, as if this were breaking news rather than a perpetual state of being. "I see," I said carefully, quickly scanning the documents. The numbers were staggering. Student loans that had gone into default, $32,000. Credit card debt spread across 6 different cards, $24,000. A business loan with an astronomical interest rate, $22,000. Plus various personal loans, unpaid medical bills, and overdraft fees. "It's $78,000 total," my mother interjected, her voice thin with stress. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. My father cleared his throat. "When Emma secured the business loan, she used our house as collateral. And now they're threatening foreclosure," my mother added, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "We could lose our home, Melissa." I looked at Emma, who still hadn't spoken, her eyes fixed on the grain of the wooden table. "Emma," I said. "Look at me." She raised her eyes, red-rimmed but dry. No tears, just a practiced look of remorse I'd seen countless times. "Why am I here? What exactly do you want from me?" My father answered instead. "You need to help us clear this debt. You have savings, a good credit score, and no dependents. You can take out a consolidation loan to cover Emma's debts." The casual way he stated this, as if he were asking me to pick up milk on the way home, sent a wave of disbelief through my body. "That's not possible," I said firmly. "I'm not taking on Emma's debt." "Family helps family," my mother said immediately, her voice taking on the emotional tremor that had worked so effectively when we were children. "What would happen to us if we lose the house? Where would we go at our age?" "You've always been good with money," my father continued, ignoring my refusal. "Emma made mistakes, yes, but she's young. She shouldn't have her future ruined by these debts." "And mine should be?" I asked incredulously. Emma finally spoke up, her voice quiet but with a familiar undertone of entitlement. "I know I messed up, Mel. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to get this bad." A tear slid down her cheek with perfect timing. "I just need this one chance to start over. Please. One chance." The same phrase I'd heard for years. "If I did this," I said carefully, "what would prevent the same thing from happening again?" "What's changed?" "I've changed," Emma insisted. "I've learned my lesson this time. I promise." My father nodded approvingly. "Emma is going to live at home and work at my friend's insurance office. We'll make sure she contributes to the payments. So I take on nearly $80,000 of debt, and Emma contributes when she can? I clarified. We've always known you'd be successful, Melissa, my mother said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. You're so good with money. Emma isn't like you, she needs more support. And there it was. The truth laid bare. They had always expected this. My financial responsibility wasn't something they'd been proud of, it was something they'd been counting on. A safety net for Emma's inevitable failures. I need time to think about this, I said, my mind already racing with the realization that this had been the plan all along. There isn't time, my father insisted. The bank needs an answer by Friday. Just sign the papers tonight, my mother added. We have everything ready. They had prepared the paperwork before even speaking to me. The presumption was staggering. I need to use the bathroom, I said, standing abruptly. As I walked down the familiar hallway to the first-floor powder room, I could hear them whispering urgently behind me. I closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time that evening, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. They weren't asking me for help. They were demanding I sacrifice my financial security, my future, to clean up Emma's mess. Again. And they saw nothing wrong with this request. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Compliant. Reliable. The perfect daughter they could exploit again and again. Something broke inside me at that moment. A lifetime of being the responsible one, of putting family first, of believing that someday they would see my sacrifices and appreciate them. But they never would. Because they expected those sacrifices. They counted on them. When I returned to the dining room, I had already made my decision. But they didn't need to know that yet. I returned to the table with a mask of calm I didn't feel. My heart was pounding, but years of suppressing my emotions in this house served me well in that moment. I need to see exactly what we're dealing with, I said, reaching for the folder. Can I take these documents home to review everything properly? I want to make sure I understand all the options. My father hesitated. We need an answer now, Melissa. If you want me to take on $78,000 of debt, I need to understand exactly what I'm getting into, I insisted, using my professional accountant voice. What's the interest rate on the business loan? Are there early payment penalties? How much equity is left in the house? I need to calculate what monthly payments would look like. My precision with financial questions visibly reassured them. This was the practical Melissa they knew. The responsible one who would find a solution. Fine, my father conceded. But we need your answer by tomorrow. The bank won't wait. I nodded, gathering the documents carefully into the folder. I'll call you in the morning with my questions, and we can meet again tomorrow evening. They seemed satisfied with this plan. My mother even attempted a hug as I left, which I mechanically returned. Thank you, sweetie, she whispered. I knew we could count on you. Those words, meant to be comforting, only cemented my decision. The drive home was a blur. The quiet of my apartment hit me like a physical force when I walked in, the space that was entirely mine, paid for with my hard work, now threatened by my family's expectations. I sat at my kitchen table, the damning folder open before me, and allowed myself to truly absorb what had happened. My family had been planning this for years. They had raised me to be the solution to Emma's problems. My financial security wasn't my achievement, it was their backup plan. What would happen if I took on this debt? Best case scenario, I'd spend the next decade or more paying it off, putting my own goals on hold. Worst case, Emma would continue her spending habits, my parents would continue enabling her, and they'd be back for more money eventually. I opened my laptop and began researching. Not debt consolidation options, escape options. How to disappear. How to start over with no credit history. Cash-only living. Cities with low cost of living and job opportunities. By midnight, I had a plan forming. By 2 a.m., I had committed to it. By dawn, I had made lists of what to take and what to leave behind. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, then methodically began executing my escape. First, I went to my bank and withdrew just under $10,000 in cash, the maximum amount that wouldn't trigger automatic reporting. I closed my main savings account, transferring the remaining balance to my checking account for one final withdrawal the next day. Next, I purchased a prepaid phone with cash at a big box store in a neighboring town, activating it with minimal information. I returned home and packed one suitcase with essential clothing, important documents, and a few sentimental items that couldn't be replaced. Everything had to fit in my car and nothing could obviously connect me to my previous life. I backed up important photos to a cloud account created under a new email address, then factory reset my personal phone and laptop after transferring necessary information. I canceled all automatic payments and subscription services, then wrote 3 brief notes. One for my boss, apologizing for my sudden departure and thanking him for the opportunities he had provided. One for my closest friend, asking her not to worry but explaining I needed to start fresh and would contact her when I could. And one final note for my family, which read simply, "I won't be your financial safety net anymore." I left the first note in an envelope to be mailed. I texted the second from my old phone before deactivating it. The third I placed on my kitchen counter, knowing they would eventually come looking for me when I didn't show up with signed loan documents. As the sun rose on what would be my last day in Columbus, I took one final look around the apartment that had been my haven. I felt a complex mix of emotions, grief for the life and relationships I was leaving behind, fear of the unknown ahead, but most prominently, a surging sense of freedom. I loaded my car in the pre-dawn light, careful not to make eye contact with any neighbors. I left my apartment keys and the final month's rent in an envelope for my landlord. By 6 a.m., I was driving west on Interstate 70, my old life disappearing in the rearview mirror. I had no specific destination yet, just away. Far away from the expectations and obligations that had defined my existence for 29 years. For the first time in my life, I was making a decision entirely for myself. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was necessary. After 3 days of driving, stopping only to catch a few hours of sleep in cheap motels that accepted cash, I arrived in Nashville, Tennessee. I had researched several potential cities during my planning and settled on Nashville for its growing economy, large enough population to blend in, and most importantly, its complete lack of connection to anyone I knew. The first week was the hardest. I checked into a budget motel on the outskirts of the city, paying cash for 7 nights and giving a false name when asked. The room was dingy, with stained carpeting and the persistent smell of old cigarettes despite the no smoking sign, but it offered anonymity while I figured out next steps. Reality hit hard that first night. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed, eating fast food and scrolling through job listings on my new prepaid phone. Without references, without a verifiable address, without being able to use my real employment history or education credentials, what could I actually do? The limitations of living off the grid were immediate and daunting. Employers wanted background checks. Landlords wanted credit scores and previous rental history. Banks wanted identification and proof of address to open accounts. The systems I had taken for granted were now barriers to my new existence. On my 3rd day in Nashville, desperation pushed me into a diner called Loretta's Home Cooking for both a cheap breakfast and to inquire about the server's wanted sign in the window. The owner, Loretta Mason, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to look straight through my hastily constructed story about moving to Nashville for a fresh start. "Experience?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. "I worked through college at a cafe," I said, the half-truth coming easily. "I'm a quick learner." "References?" I hesitated. I just got out of a bad situation back home. "I don't have any references I can use." She studied me for a long moment. I expected her to show me the door, but instead she nodded once. "Cash pay, tips are yours. Shift starts at 5 a.m. Be late once, you're out. Steal, you're out. Bring drama, you're out. Clear?" I nodded, relief washing over me. "When can I start?" Tomorrow. 5 a.m. sharp. Loretta became my first ally in my new life, though she never asked questions about my past and I never volunteered information. The diner became my anchor, a place where I began to establish Mel, the shortened version of my name I now used, as a real person. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A regular customer at the diner, Dorothy Williams, mentioned she had a spare room she was looking to rent out. At 71, the widow was living alone in a house too big for her and wanted both extra income and some company. Nothing formal, she told me over coffee one morning. Cash rent, month to month. I don't need all those rental applications and such. Just need to know you're not going to rob me in my sleep. The arrangement was perfect. Dorothy's modest house in a working-class neighborhood offered me the stability of a real address without the scrutiny of a traditional rental application. She was lonely enough to appreciate my presence but independent enough not to be intrusive. We quickly fell into a comfortable routine of shared dinners a few times a week and otherwise respecting each other's space. Still, the constant anxiety of discovery followed me everywhere. I jumped at unexpected knocks on the door. I avoided places where tourists or transplants from Ohio might congregate. I wore sunglasses in public more often than necessary. I checked over my shoulder before entering or leaving any building. The practical challenges of living without a documented identity were endless. I couldn't get a library card. Couldn't see a doctor without insurance. Couldn't sign up for loyalty programs at stores. Couldn't risk a traffic ticket. Every aspect of modern life seemed designed to require the very paper trail I was trying to avoid. But slowly, I began building a life in the shadows. I established a reputation at Loretta's as a reliable, if quiet, server. Regular customers asked for my section. I made casual friendships with other staff, though I carefully deflected personal questions. Dorothy introduced me to her church group as her new housemate from out west, and I attended occasional gatherings, always pleasant but vague about my background. I found ways to expand my income beyond waitressing. When Dorothy mentioned her nephew needed help with bookkeeping for his handyman business, I cautiously offered my services, explaining I'd taken some accounting classes. Working with cash-based small businesses allowed me to use my skills without formal employment verification. The 6-month mark of my disappearance arrived with an unexpected panic attack. I was shopping at a grocery store when I glimpsed a woman with my mother's distinctive hairstyle and build. My heart rate skyrocketed, my vision tunneled, and I abandoned my cart in the middle of the produce section to rush outside, gasping for air in the parking lot. It wasn't her, of course. My rational mind knew my mother wouldn't randomly be shopping in a Nashville grocery store. But the incident shook me, reminding me that my past wasn't as far behind me as I sometimes pretended. That night, I sat on Dorothy's back porch, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk, and allowed myself to think about what I'd left behind. Friends I'd never properly said goodbye to. A career I'd worked hard to build. The simple convenience of using my real name, my real history, my real self. "Everything all right, Mel?" Dorothy asked, joining me with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Just thinking," I replied, accepting the drink gratefully. "You know," she said carefully, "everybody's running from something. Doesn't matter much to me what your something is. What matters is where you're running to." I looked at her, surprised by the insight from this woman who'd never asked about my past. "I don't know where I'm running to," I admitted. "I just knew I had to leave where I was." Dorothy nodded, rocking gently in her chair. "Well, seems to me you're building something here. That's more than running. That's starting over." Starting over. The phrase settled something in me. I wasn't just a person in hiding, I was someone beginning again. That night marked a subtle but important shift. I stopped looking over my shoulder quite so often. I began thinking beyond survival to what kind of life I wanted to build in Nashville. I allowed myself, cautiously, to put down roots. I wonder if you've ever had to completely reinvent yourself? It's terrifying and liberating all at once. If you've been through something similar, let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey so far, Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family drama and personal reinvention. Now, let me tell you what was happening with my family while I was building my new life. 8 months into my new life, curiosity finally overcame caution. Using the public library computer rather than any device connected to me, I searched my own name. The results hit like a physical blow. Missing, Melissa Thompson, 29. Last seen leaving parents' home in Columbus, Ohio. Family concerned about mental state. The local news article included a photo of me from my company website and quotes from my distraught family. "We're extremely worried," my father stated. "Melissa has always been responsible and communicative. This disappearance is completely out of character." My mother added, "We just want to know she's safe. Melissa, if you see this, please just call and let us know you're okay." Emma was quoted too, "My sister and I are incredibly close. I can't sleep thinking about where she might be or what might have happened to her." The fabrication was stunning. In their public narrative, I wasn't a daughter who'd refused financial exploitation, I was a mentally unstable woman who had inexplicably vanished, causing my loving family immense worry. I dug deeper, finding a Facebook page created by Emma titled "Finding Melissa." It featured childhood photos, tearful video updates, and endless comments offering prayers and support. The page had thousands of followers. There was no mention of the financial ultimatum. No explanation of why I might have left. Instead, there were hints about me struggling with stress and acting erratically before my disappearance. I clicked through to Emma's personal profile and discovered photos of her attending a charity gala just weeks after I vanished. She was smiling brightly, wearing an expensive-looking dress, looking anything but devastated by her sister's disappearance. My parents' profiles showed them attending community search events, giving interviews, and accepting meal deliveries from concerned neighbors. They had become minor celebrities in Columbus, the heartbroken parents of a missing daughter. The investigation had apparently gone cold after a few months. With no signs of foul play, no activity on my accounts, and my car missing as well, police resources had been redirected to more urgent cases. The detective assigned to my case was quoted saying they were pursuing all available leads, but it was clear my disappearance had become a low priority. In April, almost a year after I left, I found an article that made my stomach turn. My parents had sold their house, the very house they had claimed they would lose if I didn't take on Emma's debts. According to the real estate listing I found, they had sold it for substantially more than they had paid, thanks to the neighborhood's appreciation over the years. Had the foreclosure threat been another manipulation? Or had they simply managed to pay Emma's debts by selling the house? Something they could have done from the beginning without involving me? The final disturbing discovery came when I checked my credit report through a secure, anonymous service. There had been multiple attempts to open new credit cards in my name in the months after my disappearance. The applications had been denied because the credit bureaus had flagged my account after the missing persons report, but the attempts were clear evidence that someone, almost certainly Emma, had tried to use my identity for financial gain even while publicly grieving my absence. The blatant hypocrisy and exploitation made me physically ill. I closed the browser and sat in the library, trembling with rage, for nearly an hour before I could compose myself enough to leave. That night, I drafted a dozen emails to local Columbus journalists, exposing the truth behind my disappearance. I typed out my entire story, attached screenshots of the credit card applications, detailed Emma's financial history and my parents' manipulation. But I never sent them. Exposing the truth would mean exposing myself. It would mean re-entering the world as Melissa Thompson, with all the vulnerability that entailed. It would mean potentially facing my family again, being drawn back into their drama, their manipulation, their expectations. I wasn't ready for that. Perhaps I never would be. Instead, I deleted the drafts and recommitted to my new life. Let them spin their narratives. Let them play the victims. Their version of Melissa Thompson was gone. She had served her purpose in their lives, the reliable daughter, the financial backup plan, the perpetual safety net. She had disappeared into the ether, and in her place, Mel was emerging, independent, cautious, and finally free of the weight of impossible family expectations. Still, knowing they were using my disappearance for sympathy, possibly financial gain, and definitely as a shield against acknowledging their own role in driving me away left a bitter taste. The temptation to reach out, to correct the record, to force them to face the truth, remained a constant pull. But each time that urge surfaced, I reminded myself of the folder sliding across the dining table. Of the expectation in my father's voice when he said, "You need to pay this." Of my mother's practiced emotional manipulation. Of Emma's entitled tears. And I remained silent, letting the ghost of Melissa Thompson fade into a cautionary tale of a daughter who simply vanished one day, never to be heard from again. 18 months after disappearing, I had established a life that, while limited in certain ways, offered freedoms I'd never experienced before. Dorothy's nephew had referred me to other small business owners needing bookkeeping services, and I'd built a modest client list that paid in cash. Combined with my continued shifts at Loretta's, I earned enough to move from Dorothy's spare room to a small apartment of my own, a cash arrangement through the brother of one of my bookkeeping clients who owned a few rental properties and wasn't particularly concerned with formal paperwork. My new apartment was nothing special, a one-bedroom with outdated appliances and thin walls, but it was mine, obtained on my own terms. I furnished it slowly with second-hand items, creating a cozy space that reflected this new version of myself. More significant than the physical space was the network of relationships I'd carefully cultivated. Loretta had become something of a mentor, her gruff exterior hiding a perceptive understanding of human nature. She never pushed for details about my past but offered practical advice about navigating life in Nashville. "You're too closed off," she told me one day as we counted the register after closing. "Not saying you need to spill your life story, but you've got walls up so high nobody can see over 'em." She was right, of course. I kept people at arm's length, afraid that genuine connection would require genuine honesty. The first real test of this came in the form of Ryan Parker, a restaurant owner who hired me to organize his chaotic bookkeeping system. At 34, Ryan had transformed his family's failing diner into a popular farm-to-table restaurant that attracted both locals and tourists. He was intelligent, direct, and unfailingly kind, qualities that made him both an ideal client and increasingly, a friend. Our professional relationship evolved naturally into something more personal. After our bi-weekly business meetings, we'd often continue conversations over coffee or a meal. Ryan shared stories about growing up in Nashville, his culinary training in New Orleans, and his vision for his restaurant's future. I contributed carefully edited anecdotes about my life, always vague about locations and dates, focusing instead on experiences and lessons learned. One evening, after Ryan had convinced me to try hot chicken for the first time, an experience my Midwestern palate was wholly unprepared for, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, Mel," he said casually, "what's your story?" "Really?" I froze, the familiar panic rising. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've been friends for what, 4 months now? And I still know almost nothing concrete about your life before Nashville. No hometown, no family stories, no college adventures. It's always when I was younger or at my previous job, never specifics." I stared at my water glass, calculating how to respond. The practiced vague answers felt wrong with Ryan. He'd been nothing but genuine with me, and the disparity in our sharing had become increasingly obvious. "I left a bad situation," I said finally. "I'm not ready to talk about it." I expected him to press for details. Instead, he simply nodded. "Fair enough. Just know that whenever, if ever, you want to talk about it, I'm here. No judgment." That simple acceptance cracked something open inside me. Not enough to spill my secrets, but enough to recognize how exhausting it was to constantly guard every word, every reference, every story. Over the following months, Ryan became a fixture in my life. We spent holidays together, explored Nashville's music scene, and eventually, hesitantly, I allowed the relationship to become romantic. The intimacy was terrifying, not just physically, but emotionally. Every deeper connection increased the weight of my secrets. After we'd been dating for 6 months, I contracted a severe case of pneumonia. With no health insurance and a fever of 104, I finally allowed Ryan to take me to an emergency room, using a false name and paying an exorbitant cash deposit. The doctor wanted to admit me, but I refused, terrified of the identity verification that would entail. Ryan brought me to his home instead, caring for me through the worst of the illness. He administered antibiotics, made homemade soup, and slept on a chair beside the bed to monitor my breathing through the night. In my feverish state, I nearly told him everything. The words bubbled up, about my family, about the debts, about why I lived this shadow life. But even delirious with fever, some core of self-preservation held them back. When I recovered, Ryan helped me move back to my apartment but left a key to his place on my key ring. "Use it whenever you want," he said. "My home is your home." The gesture nearly undid me. Home. What did that even mean anymore? My apartment was a temporary space, filled with second-hand furniture I had no attachment to. My job at Loretta's could disappear if she ever decided to sell. My bookkeeping clients could find another service at any time. Even my name wasn't truly mine. "I don't know if I can ever give you what you deserve," I told Ryan honestly one night as we sat on his porch swing. "There are things about me you don't know." He took my hand, his expression serious. "I know enough. I know you're kind, even though you try to hide it. I know you're smart as hell. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. Whatever else there is, we can figure it out together. If you want to." Did I want to? The question haunted me. The life I was building with Ryan and the community I'd found in Nashville felt more authentic than the role I'd played for my family for 29 years. Yet it was built on a foundation of necessary lies. Was it possible to create a genuine future from a false beginning? Could I ever fully step into this new life without reconciling with my past? I didn't have answers, but for the first time since leaving Columbus, I began to hope for more than just survival. I began to imagine a future where I wasn't just running from something, but running toward something. Toward a life I chose. Toward relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Toward a version of myself defined by my own values, not others' expectations. That hope was both exhilarating and terrifying. Because to fully claim that future might eventually require facing the past I'd worked so hard to escape. 2.5 years after disappearing from Columbus, I had settled into a rhythm in Nashville that felt almost normal. I worked mornings at Loretta's, managed bookkeeping for a stable roster of clients in the afternoons, and spent most evenings with Ryan. I still maintained certain precautions. I never used social media, avoided being photographed, and kept my circle of acquaintances small, but the constant fear of discovery had faded to a background hum rather than an active alarm. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was flipping through the local Nashville scene paper during my break at Loretta's, scanning concert listings for a band Ryan wanted to see, when a familiar face stopped me cold. There, in a small article about a charity fundraiser for children's arts programs, was Emma. My sister. In Nashville. The photo showed her alongside a well-dressed man identified as local business leader James Wilson and his wife Emma Wilson. She was smiling brilliantly, her hand on her slightly rounded stomach suggesting early pregnancy. My sister was in Nashville. My sister was married to a prominent local businessman. My sister was pregnant. And judging by the address mentioned for the charity event, she lived less than 5 miles from me. The coincidence was so astronomical it seemed impossible. Of all the cities in all the country, how could Emma have ended up in the same one I'd chosen? I abandoned my break, rushing to the bathroom where I locked myself in a stall and tried to control my breathing. The panic I hadn't felt in months returned full force, my heart racing so fast I could feel it in my throat. When I finally composed myself enough to return to work, Loretta took one look at my face and sent me home. "Whatever's going on, you're no good to me like this," she said gruffly, but with concern in her eyes. "Go sort yourself out." At home, I pulled out my prepaid laptop and searched for information about James Wilson. He was easy to find, CEO of a successful commercial real estate development company, board member for several local charities, featured in Nashville business publications as a 40 under 40 rising star. And there was Emma beside him in photo after photo, now calling herself Emma Wilson, playing the role of the perfect corporate wife. The couple had married 14 months ago, according to a wedding announcement in the Nashville Business Journal. They lived in a historic home in one of Nashville's most exclusive neighborhoods. Further searching revealed that my parents had visited Nashville multiple times in the past year, appearing alongside Emma and James at charity functions. There were photos of them all together, smiling for society photographers, my mother in expensive-looking outfits I'd never seen before. The Finding Melissa Facebook page was still active, though posts had become less frequent. Emma occasionally shared memories of me, always portraying our relationship as exceptionally close. The comments were filled with sympathetic responses, praising Emma's strength in continuing to search for her beloved sister. The audacity was breathtaking. As I scrolled through images of my family's new life in Nashville, a realization dawned that was both obvious and stunning: they had followed the money. Emma hadn't randomly chosen Nashville. She had targeted a wealthy man, reinvented herself as someone he would want to marry, and seamlessly transitioned from being my parents' financial burden to being their meal ticket. And they had brought their act to my city. My refuge. The immediate question was whether they knew I was here. Had they somehow tracked me to Nashville? Was their presence a coincidence, or was it part of some elaborate plan to find me? The rational part of my brain knew the latter was unlikely. If they had found me, they wouldn't be maintaining the missing daughter narrative. They would have confronted me directly or involved the police. No, it seemed the universe simply had a twisted sense of humor, placing my escape and their next financial scheme in the same city. That knowledge didn't make the situation any less dangerous. Nashville suddenly felt minuscule. Every trip to the grocery store, every walk down Broadway, every dinner at a restaurant now carried the risk of an accidental encounter. I considered running again. I had the experience now. I could disappear more efficiently, start over in Seattle or Denver or Miami. But the thought of leaving the life I'd built, leaving Ryan, Loretta, my clients who trusted me, the small but meaningful community I'd created, was devastating. I'd worked so hard to establish this version of myself. Did I really have to abandon it because Emma had, once again, intruded on my life? A week after my discovery, I was helping Ryan close his restaurant when I nearly had a heart attack. Through the front windows, I saw Emma walking past, arm in arm with a tall, distinguished-looking man I assumed was James. They were dressed for an evening out, Emma laughing at something he said. I dropped behind the counter, pulling Ryan down with me. "What the hell?" he whispered. "Just wait," I pleaded, peering over the edge of the counter until I saw them continue past the restaurant and around the corner. Ryan stared at me, concern and confusion battling on his face. "Mel, what's going on? Who was that?" The moment felt pivotal. I could make up another lie, add it to the teetering stack of half-truths our relationship was built on. Or I could finally trust someone with a piece of my reality. "Someone from my past," I said finally. "Someone I left behind when I came to Nashville." Ryan's expression softened. "The bad situation you mentioned?" I nodded. "Ex-boyfriend," he guessed. I almost laughed at how far off the mark he was. "No. Family." Ryan's eyes widened slightly. "You have family in Nashville?" I thought. "I didn't know they were here," I interrupted. "I just found out last week. They don't know I'm here either. And I need to keep it that way." The questions in Ryan's eyes were obvious, but to his credit, he simply nodded. "Okay. Whatever you need." I squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words for his undemanding support. That night, lying awake beside Ryan, I confronted a hard truth: I couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, in Nashville or elsewhere, my past would catch up with me. The question wasn't if I would have to face it, but when, and on whose terms. Did I want it to be a random collision in a grocery store aisle? An accidental sighting at a restaurant? Or did I want to control the circumstances of that inevitable confrontation? The thought of deliberately revealing myself to my family after nearly 3 years of hiding was terrifying. But perhaps less terrifying than living in constant fear of accidental discovery. I hadn't yet decided what to do when fate made the decision for me. 3 years to the day after I'd left Columbus, I walked into Ryan's restaurant for our usual Friday dinner date. The timing wasn't lost on me, this strange anniversary of my escape, now marked by a simple tradition with a man who knew me only as Mel, the bookkeeper with the mysterious past. Ryan had texted that he was running late but to go ahead and take our usual corner table. I was scrolling through the menu, though I already knew I'd order the blackened catfish, when a voice I'd know anywhere cut through the ambient restaurant noise. "Emma, for heaven's sake, you're pregnant. You can't be drinking wine." My mother's voice, sharp with disapproval. I froze, not daring to look up, hoping irrationally that if I didn't move, they wouldn't see me. But the universe wasn't that kind. "Melissa?" Emma's voice, hushed and disbelieving. I raised my eyes slowly, taking in the surreal tableau at a table not 20 feet from mine. My father, visibly aged since I'd last seen him, half risen from his chair. My mother, hand frozen midair in her signature lecturing gesture. Emma, mouth open in shock, one hand protectively over her now prominent baby bump. And a man I didn't recognize, looking confused by their collective reaction. For an endless moment, no one moved. Then Emma stood, tears already forming, and took a step toward me. "Melissa? Is it really you?" I couldn't speak. 3 years of careful hiding, of meticulous precautions, undone by the simple bad luck of choosing the same restaurant on the same night. My family descended on my table en masse, my mother already crying, my father's face cycling through shock, anger, and confusion. Emma reached for me, attempting to pull me into a hug that I instinctively avoided by standing and stepping back. "Oh my God, Melissa, we thought you were dead." Emma cried dramatically, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "Not dead," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just gone." "Where have you been?" My father demanded, his initial shock hardening into familiar authority. "Do you have any idea what you've put this family through? The police investigations, the search parties, your mother's health." "Richard, not now," my mother interrupted, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "She's alive. Our baby is alive. That's all that matters right now." The restaurant had gone quiet, other patrons openly staring at the unfolding drama. The man who had been sitting with my family, James Wilson, I presumed, approached cautiously. "Emma, sweetheart, what's going on? Who is this?" Emma turned to him, tears streaming down her face in what I recognized as her practiced emotional display. "James, it's my sister. My sister Melissa, who disappeared 3 years ago. She's alive." James looked from Emma to me, genuine shock on his face. "Your missing sister? The one from the foundation?" "Foundation?" I wondered, but had no time to process before my mother was pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the Columbus police right now. They need to know we've found you." "Don't," I said sharply, finding my voice at last. "I wasn't missing. I left." The statement landed like a stone in still water, ripples of confusion spreading across their faces. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. "You disappeared without a word. We thought you'd been kidnapped, or worse." "I left a note," I said coldly. "Did you not find it in my apartment when you went there looking for me? Or were you too busy selling off my possessions and trying to open credit cards in my name?" Emma's perfectly mascaraed eyes widened. James looked at her questioningly. "Credit cards? What is she talking about, Emma?" Before she could answer, Ryan appeared at my side, having arrived to find this bizarre family reunion in progress. I felt a flood of relief at his steady presence. "Everything okay here, Mel?" he asked quietly, his hand finding the small of my back in a protective gesture. "Mel?" my mother repeated. "Who is Mel?" "Me," I said simply. "I'm Mel now." The confusion on their faces would have been comical in any other circumstance. "I don't understand what's happening," my father said, his authoritative tone faltering. "You've been in Nashville this whole time? Living under a false name? Do you have any idea of the pain you've caused? The resources wasted looking for you? Did you pay off your debts, or are you still looking for someone else to handle them?" I asked, the question directed at Emma, but my eyes locked on my father's. The color drained from Emma's face. James turned to her, confusion evident. "What debts? Emma, what is she talking about?" My father stepped forward, lowering his voice. "This is not the time or place for this discussion. We need to go somewhere private. As a family." "We're not a family," I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "We haven't been a family since you slid that folder across the table and demanded I sacrifice my financial future to bail out Emma." Again. Ryan's hand tensed against my back, but he remained silent, a steady presence as my carefully constructed life collided spectacularly with my abandoned past. "That's not what happened," my mother interjected quickly, glancing nervously at James. "Melissa, you're confused. You've obviously been unwell." The familiar manipulation technique, suggesting I was mentally unstable, ignited a surge of anger that burned through my shock. "I'm not confused, and I'm not unwell. I made a choice 3 years ago when you made it clear that my only value to this family was as Emma's financial safety net. I chose myself for once. And I haven't regretted it for a single day." Emma was tugging urgently at James's arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. His expression was hardening as he looked between us, pieces obviously falling into place. "Emma," he said slowly, "what exactly is your sister referring to?" Before she could answer, I did. "Ask her about the $78,000 debt she accumulated. Ask her about using your in-laws' home as collateral for a business loan. Ask her why our parents expected me to take on her debt while she faced no consequences for her actions." James stared at Emma, who was now crying in earnest, not the performative tears I was familiar with but genuine distress. "Is this true?" he asked quietly. "It's not how it sounds," Emma pleaded. "It was a complicated situation." "It wasn't complicated at all," I countered. "It was exploitation, plain and simple." My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Melissa. You've always been dramatic, always felt sorry for yourself. We were trying to help your sister during a difficult time, and you abandoned your entire family without a word. I left a note," I repeated. "And I saw how heartbroken you all were, giving interviews, creating Facebook pages, starting fundraisers for the search. Tell me, how much money did you raise pretending to look for a daughter who simply didn't want to be found?" The restaurant manager was approaching now, clearly concerned about the scene unfolding in his establishment. Ryan intercepted him, speaking quietly, buying us time. "We're leaving," my father announced abruptly, grabbing my mother's arm. "This is not a conversation for a public venue. Melissa, we expect to hear from you tomorrow. We're staying at the Hyatt downtown." The familiar authoritative tone, the expectation of compliance, the absolute certainty that I would bend to his will, it was almost laughable now, 3 years removed from his influence. "No," I said simply. "You won't hear from me tomorrow or any other day. I didn't spend 3 years building a new life just to let you walk back in and destroy it." "Mel," Ryan said quietly beside me. "Let's go." I nodded, grateful beyond words for his support. As we turned to leave, Emma broke away from James and grabbed my arm. "Melissa, please," she whispered urgently. "I need to talk to you. Alone." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Not the manipulative fear she'd wielded in the past to get what she wanted, but real, desperate fear. "I'm sorry, Emma," I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. "But I can't help you anymore." And with that, I walked out of the restaurant with Ryan, leaving my family staring after me in stunned silence. Outside in the cool evening air, I finally allowed myself to shake, the adrenaline of the confrontation leaving my body in trembling waves. "My car's this way," Ryan said gently, guiding me toward the parking lot. "Thank you," I managed. "For being there. For not asking questions." He helped me into the passenger seat, then walked around and slid behind the wheel. Instead of starting the engine, he turned to me. "I think it's time for those questions now, Mel," he said quietly. "Or should I call you Melissa?" I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "Mel," I said firmly. "I'm Mel now. Melissa doesn't exist anymore." Ryan nodded, starting the car. "Okay, Mel. Let's go home, and you can tell me as much or as little as you're ready to share." As we drove away from the restaurant, I watched my past recede in the side mirror. For 3 years, I'd been running from that confrontation, dreading it, fearing it. Now that it had happened, I felt strangely liberated. They knew I was alive. They knew I had left by choice. And most importantly, they knew I wasn't coming back. A week passed with no contact from my family. I'd taken time off from Loretta's, afraid they might look for me there. I'd forwarded my small business clients to a colleague, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't entirely untrue. I'd essentially gone into hiding again, but this time with Ryan beside me. On the night of the restaurant confrontation, I had finally told him everything. My real name, my history in Columbus, the financial ultimatum, my careful escape, the 3 years of building a new identity. He'd listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or squeezing my hand, but offering no judgment. When I finished, he simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with this." That trust felt like the most valuable thing I'd given anyone in years. 7 days after the confrontation, there was a knock at my apartment door. Ryan and I were making dinner, and we both froze at the sound. No one visited me unannounced. My neighbors didn't even know my name. Ryan moved to answer it, but I stopped him. "Let me." Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing alone in the hallway, looking nervous and uncharacteristically subdued. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a loose sweater that did little to disguise her pregnancy. I hesitated, then unlatched the door. "How did you find me?" I asked without preamble. Emma shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I followed you home from the restaurant that night. I needed to talk to you." I considered closing the door in her face. But curiosity won out over caution. "Are Mom and Dad with you?" She shook her head. "They don't know I'm here. Can I come in? Please?" I stepped back, allowing her into my small apartment. Ryan appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "I'll give you two some privacy," he offered. "No," I said quickly. "Stay. Please." Emma glanced between us, clearly trying to assess our relationship. I offered no explanation. We sat awkwardly in my small living area, the air heavy with 3 years of separation and a lifetime of imbalanced family dynamics. "James knows everything now," Emma said finally, breaking the silence. "About the debts, about the jewelry business, about what Mom and Dad asked you to do. I had to tell him after the restaurant. He almost left me." She placed her hand protectively over her stomach, and I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. "But he didn't leave," I observed. "No. But things are different now. He's put me on a strict budget. He's requiring financial counseling. He's reviewing all our accounts." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "He's treating me like a child." "Or like an adult who needs accountability," I countered. Emma sighed. "Maybe. I don't know. It's humiliating, but maybe I deserve it." This admission, this small acknowledgement of responsibility, was so unexpected coming from Emma that I was momentarily speechless. "I didn't come here to ask for money," she continued, apparently mistaking my silence for skepticism. "I swear. I came because I need to understand why you left like that. Without saying goodbye. Without letting me know you were okay." The question ignited a flare of anger I thought I'd moved past. Are you serious right now? You were literally sitting at the table when Dad demanded I take on your debt. You watched it happen. You let it happen. I know, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I know, and I'm sorry. I was selfish and entitled and scared. I was drowning in debt I couldn't pay, and when Dad suggested you could help, I let myself believe it was a reasonable solution. It was exploitation, I said flatly. You were all exploiting me. Again. Emma nodded, a tear spilling over. Yes. We were. And when you disappeared, it was easier to pretend we were victims than to admit what we'd done to drive you away. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me but remained silent, letting this overdue conversation unfold. The fundraisers, I said. The Facebook page. The interviews. Tell me about those. Emma had the grace to look ashamed. It started genuinely. We really were worried when you first disappeared. But then. I don't know. It became this thing that people responded to. People were so supportive, so generous. And it was easier than admitting the truth. Which is. That I had treated you terribly. That we'd pushed you to the point where disappearing seemed like your only option. She wiped at her tears. I'm so sorry, Melissa. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I studied my sister, trying to gauge her sincerity. The Emma I knew was a master manipulator, capable of producing tears on demand when it served her purposes. But there was something different about her now, a subdued quality, a lack of the dramatic flair that usually accompanied her emotional displays. What do Mom and Dad know about you being here? I asked. Nothing. They went back to Columbus yesterday. They want to file a police report saying you've been found but are refusing contact. They're not handling this well. I wasn't surprised. My parents had built an entire narrative around being the grieving, searching family of a missing daughter. The reality, that their daughter had chosen to leave and was thriving without them, didn't fit their preferred self-image. And what do you want, Emma? I asked directly. Why are you really here? She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. I want to know my sister. The real one, not the version I exploited for years. And I want a chance to be someone you might eventually be willing to know as well. It was perhaps the most honest thing Emma had ever said to me. I can't make any promises, I said after a long moment. Too much has happened. I understand, she said quickly. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I'm having a baby in 3 months. Your niece. And I've been thinking a lot about what kind of mother I want to be, what kind of family I want to create. I don't want to repeat the patterns from our childhood. The mention of her baby, my niece, landed differently than I expected. Not an obligation, not a manipulation tactic, but simply a fact connecting us in a way that couldn't be undone. I need time, I said finally. This is all overwhelming. Emma nodded, standing awkwardly. Of course. I'll leave my number, if that's okay. No pressure, but if you ever want to talk. She scribbled on a slip of paper and placed it on the coffee table. As she moved toward the door, she paused. Your life here, are you happy? I glanced at Ryan, who gave me a small, encouraging smile, then back to Emma. Yes. I built something real here. Something that's mine. I'm glad, she said softly. You deserve that. After she left, Ryan and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. What are you thinking? He finally asked. I'm thinking about second chances, I replied slowly. Not for my parents, I don't think that relationship can or should be salvaged. But for Emma? I don't know. Maybe people can change. Do you want her in your life? He asked simply. I don't know, I admitted. But I think I want the option to decide for myself, on my own terms. 6 months later, I sat in a coffee shop across from Emma and her 6-week-old daughter, Lily. Our relationship was cautious, built on careful boundaries I'd established and Emma had respected. We met once a month, just the two of us, and now Lily, keeping our interactions separate from the rest of our lives. Emma had followed through on the financial counseling, was working part-time at an art gallery, and seemed genuinely committed to changing her relationship with money. My parents remained in Columbus, occasionally sending messages through Emma expressing their desire to reconnect, which I consistently declined. "James wants to meet you properly," Emma said, gently rocking Lily's carrier with her foot. "When you're ready." I nodded noncommittally. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to expand our carefully contained reconnection to include others. My own life had transformed in unexpected ways. The confrontation at the restaurant had lifted a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. No longer looking over my shoulder, I'd finally obtained a legal ID under my chosen name, Mel Thompson, through a legal name change process. I'd started a small financial literacy workshop for women, drawing on my accounting background and my personal experience with financial autonomy. Ryan and I were now living together, planning a future neither of us rushed to define but both of us valued deeply. He understood better than anyone that trust and security were precious commodities for me, not easily granted or taken for granted. "Mom asked again if you might come to Columbus for Christmas," Emma said tentatively, breaking into my thoughts. "The answer is still no," I replied evenly. "Some relationships are better left in the past." Emma nodded, accepting this boundary as she had accepted all the others I'd established. "I understand." I told them not to expect it. We finished our coffee, made tentative plans to meet the following month, and parted with a brief, still awkward hug. As I walked home through the Nashville streets, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I'd left Columbus with nothing but a suitcase and a desperate need to escape. I'd built a life from scratch, constructed a new identity, and found a kind of freedom I'd never thought possible. The irony wasn't lost on me. In disappearing from my family, I'd finally found myself. In leaving behind Melissa Thompson, the perpetual safety net, I'd discovered Mel. Stronger, more autonomous, and unwilling to sacrifice her well-being for others' comfort. Some might view my disappearance as extreme or even selfish. But I'd learned that sometimes the most courageous act of self-care is walking away from people who see you only for what you can give them. Sometimes the family we choose, the Ryan in my life, the Loretta, the Dorothy, provides more genuine support than the family we're born into. I unlocked the door to the apartment Ryan and I now shared, feeling the simple joy of returning to a space that was truly mine, filled with people who valued me for exactly who I was, not what I could do for them. The forced smile, the constant accommodation, the expectation of endless sacrifice, all left behind in Columbus 3 years ago. In their place, boundaries, self-respect, and the quiet confidence that comes from building a life on your own terms. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even really an ending at all, but a continuing journey of defining and protecting my worth. Some might call it revenge, but I saw it differently. It wasn't about hurting my family, it was about finally, belatedly, prioritizing myself. If my story resonates with you in any way, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and self-preservation? Did you have to disappear from a toxic situation to find yourself? Please like this video if any part of my journey spoke to you, subscribe for more stories of family dynamics and personal growth, and share with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's the bravest form of starting over. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into.